just surprised everyone in the 2024 Paris Olympics by reaching the gold medal game and pushing the United States to the limit.
In the biggest moment, Wemby going right at Embiid. A different level of intensity.
With arguably the strongest roster French basketball has ever seen, the Frenchmen rallied in front of their home crowd to defeat powerhouse teams like Canada and Germany before scaring the USA in the finals. Had it not been for that Stephen Curry barrage in the final 3 minutes of the gold medal game, Team France would have probably broken the American stranglehold on the Olympic gold medal in basketball. But it looks like this isn't the last we've seen of the Frenchmen dominating the basketball world, because this team could still go all the way up. Now, if you want to know how far this team could possibly make it, you might want to stick around and see what French basketball has to offer in the future. Every era, there's always that one basketball country that enters a golden age and challenges the USA's dominance in this sport. We saw the Soviets trading punches with the USA in the decades before the Dream Team launched a new era. During the 2000s and 2010s, Spain became the biggest threat to the USA, especially with the Gasol brothers manning the paint. But it's now starting to look like new challengers are stepping up to the plate as a new basketball powerhouse has risen. More than 2 decades ago, France wasn't known for its prowess in basketball. It wasn't until Tony Parker got to the NBA and started a French movement in his home country that France started taking basketball more seriously.
So quick, so explosive. Tony Parker to the basket, lays it up and in.
Since then, we've seen a lot of good players making their way from France to the NBA. These names include Nick Batum, Rudy Gobert, Evan Fournier, and none other than Victor Wembanyama himself. But it wasn't until Wemby's era that this team truly took off, allowing French basketball to plant its name on top of the international basketball scene. The proof was the 2024 Olympic Games conveniently held in Paris, France, where Wemby and his teammates made a great run to the gold medal game. Along the way, this team defeated notable teams, including Canada and Germany. With a roster full of NBA players, Canada was predicted to be the biggest challenge to the Americans in the Olympics. Meanwhile, Germany is the defending FIBA world champion. But France defeated both those teams on the strength of its solid play and by relying heavily on Victor Wembanyama's presence. Against the Americans in the finals, France rallied in the fourth quarter, nearly finishing a huge comeback if it weren't for those nuclear bombs that Stephen Curry hit. We can argue that the French could have defeated arguably the most talented Team USA roster assembled if the Americans didn't have the greatest shooter in the world, saving them with those clutch shots.
Booker on the attack. Kick. Curry again. You already know.
But everyone on that French team played spectacular basketball, and it all started with none other than the alien himself. With Wemby down the middle, the French had a lot of different ways of killing their opponents. They could simply allow their best player to use his 7'4" frame and score over everyone on the court. If they doubled him, Wemby showed enough poise and skill to make the right passes. People on the court were getting open shots because teams wanted to send multiple defenders over to Wembanyama. He excelled at the same level defensively by getting his hands in the passing lanes and blocking shots left and right. Teams were afraid to challenge the paint because they knew they would get turned away with Wemby protecting the basket. Wembanyama's presence allowed the other players to contribute at a high level. Gershon Yabusele, a former NBA player himself, was second only to Wemby scoring. He had big games against Canada and Germany. He also had the dunk of the tournament when he jammed the ball over LeBron James. The other guys weren't too shabby as well. Evan Fournier, Isaiah Cordnier, Mathias Lesor, and Nicolas Batum all stepped up and delivered when it mattered most. While France didn't have the most talent out of all the top teams in the Olympics, this team had a good combination of star players, role players, shooters, defenders, and hustle guys, who all had important roles to play. Wembanyama, however, was the alpha and omega of that team, averaging 15.8 points, 9.7 rebounds, 3.3 assists, 2 steals, and 1.7 blocks the entire tournament. At 20 years old, he found himself in the same company as LeBron James, Stephen Curry, and Nikola Jokic in the Olympics All-Star 5. He could have even been the MVP of that tournament had France won the gold. But at a young age, he was already dominant enough to scare the US, scoring 26 points in that gold medal game. With the Frenchmen's best player so young at only 20 years old, the sky is basically the limit for this team. Wemby is set to eventually become the best player in the world because of his unreal potential both in terms of his size and skill.
Back out, Wembanyama doesn't hesitate. That three is good!
There's no other player in the world scarier than him when it comes to what he could potentially become in the future, and France is happy they have the alien playing for them. On top of that, this French team isn't even that old yet. While the trio of LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and Stephen Curry, who are all deep in their 30s, have possibly played their last Olympics for the blue and white, France's assets are still quite possibly available for the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles. With the possible exception of Nick Batum, Nando De Colo, Evan Fournier, and Rudy Gobert, who are all in their 30s, the core could be returning in 4 years. We're talking about Cordonier, Lasor, and Nick Kenyina returning. While he played a limited role, Bilal Coulibaly is a legit NBA-level player who could become a capable starting-level wing in the big leagues in the future. This team has the chemistry, familiarity, and experience to become a threat in the future. In comparison to the other teams, there's no other squad that has more upside than this French national team. While Canada, Germany, and Serbia could still be threats, Team USA looks to be on the hot seat, especially with its 3 best players in the Olympics possibly retired by 2028. America still has the likes of Anthony Edwards, Devin Booker, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown, possibly leading a crop of young stars in 2028. But without proven star vets like LeBron, KD, and Steph, Team USA might struggle against the French, who are only getting better and better.
He wants a medal to match those shoes, LeBron James. Wembanyama for 3. Wow,
Remember that France has been investing heavily in basketball for the past decade. That's why the 2024 NBA draft featured 4 French players in the top 10 and another one further down the first round. A total of 5 French players were drafted in 2024, and all these guys have talent. Zachary Rizache is set to provide wing scoring and versatility in the future. Meanwhile, the 7-foot Alex Sarr could form a dreaded twin tower combination with Wemby down in the middle. Meanwhile, there are other young talents waiting in the youth teams in France, as we could see more French players making their way to the NBA in the next 4 years. This means that France has a deep pool of young talents ready to make some noise in international competition. So even though this team is set to lose its veterans, we know that France can bank on its talent and youth, especially with someone like Wembanyama acting as the ultimate building block for the future. The French Revolution is upon us, and it's likely that France is going to be the scariest basketball country other than the US in the next 10 years or so. Let's not even forget about the fact that France is the only country in the last 20 years to give the USA a real scare in the Olympics. Of course, we've seen the Americans losing in international competition in the FIBA tournament, but a lot of people don't count those losses because America tends to send second and third tier players to the World Cup while reserving its best players for the Olympics. But in the last 2 Olympics, France came close to beating the USA twice while beating them once in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. The USA needed Kevin Durant's heroics in the gold medal game to beat France by 5 points. Now this is important because the Americans have never been pushed in the Olympics ever since sending the Redeem team in 2008. Since 2008, USA basketball has lost only once, and we're talking about the loss to the French in Tokyo during the group stage of the tournament. That loss to France means that the USA isn't invincible on the world stage of basketball anymore, and that the rest of the world has been catching up steadily but surely to the talent and skill level we see in American players. Still, the USA has been winning the games that matter most, including the gold medal matches in Tokyo and Paris. So, even if France has been pushing the US hard the past 2 Olympic Games, the Americans have been triumphant, even though they're no longer blowing teams out by 20 points every night.
Curry, always on the move, draws the double again, there's surely not shot!
But how long can they sustain that, especially now that France has been closing the talent and skill gap? It looks like France is going to be on USA basketball's radar in the next 4 or so years to get a good idea of what this team could bring in the next Olympics. We know that the USA still has more talent, but we also know that talent alone won't be enough in international competition, where the rules are different and the other teams have more chemistry and experience playing together. So with France collecting talent like they're stockpiling nuclear weapons, we know that this team could eventually explode and be a true powerhouse on the international stage. And with Victor Wembanyama set to take over as the best player in the world at some point in the future, Team USA needs to step up to keep its stranglehold on that Olympic gold.